One of the coolest parts of John Mayer's 2019 World Tour Pedalboard was the course drive loop, in which John had the Blackstone Mosfet Overdrive and a Boss CE-2 together, both on in a small true bypass loop, with at the step of one single switch he could activate both pedals at the same time when soloing, just to give himself a little bit less tap dancing than he normally would have to do on a traditional pedalboard setup like the 2019 World Tour Pedalboard was. This is a video that a few of you guys have asked me to make for a while now, going over the Blackstone settings and kind of some uses of the course drive loop. So today's video is all dedicated to this one little portion of John Mayer's pedalboard from 2019. Alright, so the first thing I want to do is go over John's actual settings for both of these pedals and kind of how the system exactly worked. Now, on your screen, you will see a couple of things here. You will see a course drive loop labeled pedal, which is just a Keeley looper, one of the older ones. If the camera will focus, there we go on this. Just like the one I'm holding up right here, it's an older Keeley Electronics, just true bypass looper. It's got, you know, the two actual input and output jacks for the loop of the pedal, and then the rest of the main signal chain to go through it. Two lights. Blue will indicate that it is on, red will indicate that the loop is off. And then just above it on the board here, we have the Blackstone Mosfet Overdrive and the CE-2. Now, the Blackstone is a really interesting pedal for a few different reasons. In its actual design and the way the pedal was meant to be used, there are actually a few things you can do with it that you might not expect if you're not familiar with the pedal. I owned one a while back, and then in kind of my big purge of gear downsizing that I did, and slowly now I'm rebuilding up my collection, it's a pedal I want to get again because I really did enjoy the sounds you could get out of it. There are two switches with this pedal. On the left, or in this case kind of the lower switch, the way the pedal is orientated, you have the channel switcher for the red and brown channel, and then on the top where it's actually labeled on John's version, you have on and off. Now, it doesn't have traditional knobs and like normal pedals would have. They're almost like these little flathead screws that are flush with the body of the pedal. It's really interesting. What I did is I stuck like a guitar pick actually in it to fine tune where the settings are, but there are just these little notches that in the shot here you can barely make out to actually indicate where everything is set. So the first thing I'll point out is the actual, I'm just going to call them knobs. The knob in the center there, the setting in the center there, is actually for the EQ, and it is pretty over to the right side where it's more the flat EQ for the pedal. That one is just universal to both channels of the pedal. But then we have the levels for the red and the brown sides, both of which are actually, I'd say, a lot closer to 10 o'clock, not providing a ton of level for the pedal when John was using it in combination with other drive pedals, which we're going to get into. And then what is pretty cool is you can see the red drive actually has two separate sections, one for humbuckers and one for single coils. Over more to the right side is for single coils, and that is where that setting is turned pretty far over to the right side, so clearly indicating that John was setting it up to use with single coils. And then the brown drive wasn't set quite as high as the red side was, but it's still pretty over to the right, you know, maybe like 3:30, you know, getting a little closer to 4 o'clock from what I can tell, at least from the settings here. And then there's John's Boss CE-2 as well, which we see. And one thing I do want to point out is that this is just a more typical CE-2. John wasn't using, at least at this point, a long dash, silver screw, ultra fancy, the kind of one everyone goes after for the CE-2 here. This is just a black screw, short dash CE-2. Could be black label Japan, could be green label Japan. Any CE-2 will really do a very good job of getting you this sort of sound. You don't need to go for the most collectible thing to get great tone, is just what I'm trying to say here. And the settings that you see for the rate and depth are actually kind of similar to what we see John just typically using with the CE-2. The CE-2 didn't last long on the 2019 World Tour Pedalboard, which again we're going to get into, but when it comes back around to the Sob Rock era, Last Train Home's course sound, for example, these settings, both of which just below noon, are actually what John used to get the Last Train Home course sound in live during the Sob Rock era as well. So these definitely seem to be the CE-2 settings, at least that John has favored for a number of years now. But that's just a really brief highlight of the actual settings that John was using for this these two pedals. Now, the one other thing I do want to mention is when I at least personally had my Blackstone, I used the brown channel a lot more than I used the red channel. I just found that with the whole gain stacking that I was doing with my Centaur, my TS10, and then the Blackstone in the course drive loop, it was getting pretty gnarly, and the red channel I felt like just was giving me a little bit too much gain. Now, John's rig, everything the way it is set up, it's entirely possible he was using the red channel and had, things maybe, the way he had specifically set them, just made it work a little bit more in the context of his rig. So if you have one of these, you can try John's settings, but in reality, it's just what is going to work and sound best in the context of your own rig is what will get you probably closer to John's sound than just copying his settings, especially with overdrive pedals and things like that. But this should at least serve you a good starting point if you do have this pedal and want to actually, see what John had it set and see how it sounds in your rig. You guys get what I'm saying. Overdrive pedals, you can't just blanket copy them and use them within your rig. Your guitar, your pickups, the rest of your drive pedals, the rest of your rig, your amp, the speaker, all inputs and how these drive pedals especially sound. So they're ones you got to tweak a little bit more to actually get to sound how you are looking for, but that's just an example of how John had his set, at least during the 2019 World Tour. All right, and now this brings us on to how John actually uses the chorus drive loop. And the best example we have by far of this is during the 2019 World Tour rehearsals when John would perform Helpless and use this chorus drive loop as part of the solo. He would gain stack the TS10 into the Klon Centaur into the chorus drive loop. So he was gain stacking 3 overdrive pedals in combination with the CE-2 for the solo, and this is what it sounds like. It sounds really great. And we do just have a little bit of the ending to the solo of Moving On and Getting Over from rehearsals as well, where John was at this point at least using the chorus drive loop for part of his solo tone for that performance as well. And then for rehearsals, lastly, what I do want to mention is that there is the performance of I Guess I Just Feel Like, where John does step on both Keeley loopers that he had on his board on the left side. If you're John looking down at the board on the left first row side of it, where he had the psych loop as well as the chorus drive loop. Now the psych loop contained the Shin-Ei Companion Psychedelic Amplifier Machine for that I Guess I Just Feel Like super fuzz tone, and then beside it was then again that second looper with the chorus drive loop. Now when John actually steps on all of the pedals, he steps on all of them. So what I initially thought he was doing when I kind of first was really paying attention to the footage from here, the whole I Guess I Just Feel Like tone mystery, was that he steps on both of them. So I figured that he was actually stacking everything together to get this tone. And because the actual super fuzz circuit of the psychedelic amplifier machine was in front of everything in the actual chain, the chorus drive loop still would have been last, meaning that the modulation from the CE-2 would be what you're hearing last. So it's not hitting the fuzz circuitry or anything, but really zooming in, you can kind of see that the light for the one Keeley looper goes from blue to red, or just more of a dollar off color, indicating that actually the chorus drive loop was left on, and then John, as he's going to turn on his pedals for the solo, turns that chorus drive loop actually off. So I did just want to mention, because I believe in another video that I made a while back on the channel, I did state incorrectly that John was using the chorus drive loop as part of the tone here, but this sound would have been, I'm assuming, the Univibe portion of the psychedelic amplifier machine as well, because there is a setting on that device where you can get both the super fuzz circuit and the Univibe together. So that's what I believe it would have been set to, because we're not hearing the modulation from the CE-2. So just a quick correction here based on something I'd said before, but that's going to round out rehearsals. But what about actually live during the 2019 World Tour? Now, with the start of the 2019 World Tour, John did the first leg touring in New Zealand, Australia, and throughout Asia, and this version of the pedalboard was a bit different compared to the one that we saw him using during rehearsals. And it's important just to point out, because on the very far bottom left side of the pedalboard, we only had one Keeley looper, which was for the chorus drive loop. You see the Blackstone is then placed above it, and then the CE-2 blacked out is above that as well. So everything was kind of just on that very far side of the pedal board. The loop for the psychedelic amplifier machine was placed on the very far right side instead by the Polytune 3. So that's kind of where everything was. So if you saw John stepping on the very far side of the pedal board and then you hear a little bit of modulation, that is guaranteed to be the chorus drive loop. Now here's where things get interesting, because I've really struggled to find John actually using the course drive loop live, and we know that it was primarily going to be used for Helpless just based off of rehearsals, moving on and getting over, as well as the only other thing we have to really go off of. I've watched a ton of footage. I've watched every performance of Helpless that was from that first leg of the tour, and the only example that I can find where I believe you can hear, because the audio quality isn't the best, and this is the only actual video footage from this performance in Auckland of Helpless, but I believe that you can hear it going on. Plus you also see John stepping off to the far left side of the board as well when the solo begins, and then when it ends as well, you'll see him stepping over it to turn it off. But this is the only example where I believe live John actually used the course drive loop. Now, it's entirely possible that there are other instances where John did use the course drive loop, but this is the only one that I've been able to find where I kind of think, okay, based on what you can see and what you can hear, to me, I believe this is what he was using for this performance, and I wish we had better audio quality from the show to really be able to confirm. But other than that, this is the only time I've been able to find John using it, because when it would come to the North American leg of the 2019 World Tour, we'd see some changes to the pedal board, and the course drive loop would be dropped entirely from the board. So no more CE-2, no more Blackstone Mosfet Overdrive, and that Keeley loop are all gone. And then for the remainder of the 2019 World Tour, John did not have this set up on his board at all. Also kind of indicating that it was a cool concept, but it just was something that John didn't find himself really going for and using. It ended up being something that they experimented with, and then just, at least on the first leg, what I believe is he didn't use it a whole lot, so then they just ended up dropping it and changing it out for other things and experimenting for the rest of the tour, because if there's something on the board taking up a lot of space, 3 pedals worth, that John really isn't going to use, it's not worth having on the board in that context where he can just bring on other things, and that's exactly what he did. The Smoky Signal, Tubeless Overdrive, the Zen Drive 2, things that it really appeared that he didn't use at all, as far as I'm aware, got dumped off from the board when it came to the North American leg, and he kind of used the break in between to make some changes and adjustments to the pedal board. Really between legs is where some things did happen. So that's the course drive loop. Unfortunately, not a lot going on, but a really great pedal in the Blackstone Appliances Mosfet Overdrive. It's fantastic. I did really enjoy it, and I think if you guys tried it, you would really like it, especially for that Helpless thing. I guess I just feel like thing, even it can do something like that. So the course drive loop is just really one of those interesting things that John had experimented with during the 2019 World Tour. And I know a lot of you guys were super curious as to what John's actual settings were and some examples of him using it. And like I've said, just knowing that it was dropped completely from the board in between the first and second leg of the tour, it's a short list of shows to actually try and gather footage from to highlight, to be like, okay, there's only a few shows that he could have used it during, and this is the only example in Auckland that I believe I've been able to find. So if you guys have seen something that sounds like it might have been used, you know, always let me know in the comments down below, and I can go and check it out as well. But kind of makes sense. experimented with it, didn't really use it, make room for something else. But I hope you guys still enjoyed this video kind of talking about one of these more unique aspects of the 2019 World Tour Pedalboard. And if it's something you want to try out, I know a lot of guys in the John Mayer Gear Lounge on Facebook have the Blackstone Appliances Overdrive, and they really like it. Get some great tones with it. The CE-2 as well, you know, chorus is something in kind of the modern John Mayer sounds has become a lot more relevant and a lot more used. So this is something that you can totally get great John Mayer tones out of, and great tones just in general if it's something you wanted to try and do with your board. But it's a topic I know especially a few of you guys have been asking me to do for a while, so finally got around to making it. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. Thanks so much again for watching all the way to this point at the end of the video. Take care, guys, and I'll see you on the next one.
Anyway, go ahead and click the subscribe button if you like what you see.